Welcome to Free Speech TV. My name is Carl Nagin. I'm here at the 2018 Bioneers Conference, and I am very pleased and honored to introduce one of the co-founders of Bioneers, Nina Simons. Nina has been a lifelong advocate for women's equity, gender equity, women's leadership. She has played a key role in the development and nurturing of Bioneers. She's a former president of Seeds of Change. Welcome, Nina.
Thank you,
for
Carl.
being here. It's
Really
so
nice
great
to
have
be with you.
Okay, great. So, Nina, I want to ask you about Pathway Forward, which is, last year it was Rising Up, and now it's Pathway Forward. We are about to have one of the most momentous elections in our history. There's so much riding on it. I live in Berkeley. There is such despair and fear.
Yeah.
How do we get through this? How do we get through this very, very dark, divisive time? What vision do you have, does Bioneers have to help us through this miasma that we're facing?
Well, I think what's important, Carl, is that the theme that we chose for this year's conference is actually plural pathways forward. In recognition that we are in a period of movement building that surpasses anything we've ever seen before. And I believe it's a long haul. I am not sure we're going to have a quick fix with this election. I hope things will get better, of course, but the truth is our electoral system is broken, as are most of our other systems. You know, whether we look at our economic system, our educational system, our health systems, really every single system that our civilization is built around is in a time of breakdown and breakthrough. And so I think there are multiple pathways forward. I think electoral shifts are certainly very important. I think the idea of moving towards what some have called a reflective democracy, so that those who represent us in the House and Senate actually reflect the populations they are representing. But we have a long way to go for that, you know. Even if all the women and people of color who are running in this election win, we're still nowhere near where we need to get to.
Because we need to build new institutions, among other things.
Well, yes, and some of the research that's out there has shown that any minority group needs to reach a level of 30% before they can feel flanked enough to be fully represented and fully expressive. So, for instance, if all the women running are elected this November, we'll go from 19% to 23%. And given that women are 51% in the world, that's not so great. We got a ways to go. And I think part of the underlying premise of Bioneers, and I think what history has shown us, is that culture changes often before institutions and policies change. And I think we're in the middle of a giant culture shift, and it's going to take time. And so I find myself really looking to inspiration from those who have led movements from the perspective of a long haul before, knowing that they're going to face adversity, knowing that we're going to encounter obstacles. I mean, from the women's perspective, you know, and the perspective of gender equity, there is so much work to be done. And, you know, the work is both internal and external, I believe. I believe in order for that culture shift to really take root, it requires that many of us do our inner work to actually identify and claim what is a healthy feminine, what is a healthy masculine, regardless of what gender we may happen to inhabit at the moment. Because we all have masculine and feminine within us, and we all live somewhere on that spectrum at any given time. But we've inherited such rotten role models and such outmoded stereotypes that we've got a lot of peeling away to do in order to identify what's a healthy relationship, both within ourselves and then among each other, and then in the larger society. So pathways forward.
So let's focus on this culture shift in the realm of gender equity. As I was coming here today, someone alerted me to a New York Times article that appeared today in which 10 men talked about experiences of coercion, intimidation of women in their lives, and they were doing what they were calling themselves out in this, and what that meant to them to do that. And that seemed to me to be rather extraordinary. In other words, they were confessing that they had been involved in these actions, and then now that they're adults with their parents, their children, this has made them very uneasy. But clearly, this could not have happened without the Me Too movement. We have seen, ever since Trump became president, we've seen so many women bravely step forward to give these horrific stories, and whether it's the Kavanaugh story or whether it's Harvey Weinstein, and the courage to do that. So I want to ask you, though, because I'm a male here and I grew up in an abusive family, so I want to know what needs to change here, what needs to heal. And you're on a panel this week talking about a sort of new paradigm of maleness, or maybe it's an old paradigm of maleness, one rooted in compassion and one rooted in a kind of loving kindness. Could you talk about what you see we need to do socially? This is a big question, very big question.
Well, of course it is. And, I'm hosting a panel actually where 3 men will be responding to questions and interacting around the question of how do we reclaim a sacred relationship to manhood. And, all of us have heard the phrase toxic masculinity. And I think that it's been very prevalent in our culture, in our media. Almost people of any ethnicity and class and background have grown up with being exposed to definitions of manhood that are by nature aggressive and violent and non-emotional, and dominating as a means of proving masculinity. And so the panel will really explore from the vantage point of 3 men who have very different life experiences. One who is an indigenous elder, really rooted in a Mixteca tradition. Another who is an African-American man who's a very outspoken feminist and advocate for healing the gender wound, and a young white guy. And really the purpose is to surface from among each of them, what does healthy manhood look like to them? And what woke them up? Because, in the story of the New York Times piece that you're describing, those men had to have some sort of awakening. And I think the truth is we are in a moment of societal awakening for men as well as for women. Because I recently heard a story from a friend whose son was molested in college by older classmates who were women. And the kind of sexual abuse that he endured is every bit as traumatizing as a woman might experience at the hands of men. So I think a culture that has defined manhood as something that involves aggression and domination and a kind of sexualization of the other into parts and pornography rather than whole humanness has led us to a time where a lot of people are waking up to the damages that bias has wrought. And yet at the same time, Carl, I just heard an interview today with a woman who was a Trump supporter who was talking about how the Kavanaugh trial mobilized her to be more strongly in favor of Trump. So we are in a time of incredible polarization and divide, and I think we need to step off our ideologies and meet each other with compassion and curiosity, and from the place of our deepest humanity, because healing those rifts in our culture is necessary in order for the earth to be able to continue to sustain life. And the context is so big and so urgent right now that, you know, we can't afford to be playing footsie anymore. We really need a mass effort to reach each other's deepest humanity in the interest of all our children and all the children of all life on Earth.
And Earth itself.
Well, yes, although Earth will survive. She may take a few million or billion years to get over us. She'll survive. We don't need to save the Earth. We actually need to save ourselves. We need to save the capacity of Earth to sustain our life and all the other species' lives. And so we have a very self-interested driver here. You know, it's not about being humanitarian or taking care of the Earth. Yes, I am deeply hurt and concerned about the loss of species that's going on and the toxicity throughout our planet, you know. But really it's about us.
But is there a link that you see between the archetype of sacred maleness, sacred femaleness, the sacred feminine, the sacred masculine, and healing the Earth too?
Sure. Well, sure. I mean, I've been thinking a lot recently about what sustains me in a time of trauma like this. And so I've been thinking about what I call my roots and my branches. And the roots nourish me from the invisible world, and the branches help me reach up to the future that I'm working towards. And one of my roots is my Jewish heritage. And
Tree of Life.
well, the Tree of Life. And in the ancient book, the Kabbalah, they say that the source of all of the pain and hardship in the world is the sacred masculine and feminine turning away from each other. And that one of the most profound things we can contribute toward healing is to reunite the sacred masculine and feminine. So what does that mean? It's different for each of us, right? But, you know, as I discovered my own relationship to gender, part of what happened for me was not only the realization that we've inherited a legacy from hundreds or thousands of years of imbalance of the masculine and the feminine, but also the awareness that that imbalance can be seen as the dysfunction in all of our policies, all of our institutions, throughout our society.
So this really becomes the lens for healing.
For me it does, you know, and it's one lens. I mean, I would never seek to impose it on anyone else. I think that's why pathways for healing and pathways forward feels important. I think that part of what we need to learn as humans is how to optimize what we share in common while really respecting our differences at the same time. And I think the women's movement is doing that. I think the youth movements are doing that. You know, those are some of my sources of greatest inspiration and hope right now.
In this time of disunion and division, it is so wonderful that Bioneers has this vision, instead of division, of bringing all of these different pathways together. There is, in the Kabbalah, the image of the Sephiroth. And I keep thinking that those are pathways to wisdom and pathways to wholeness. Thank you, Nina Simon, for being with us. Is there anything else you'd like to say about this year and this year's theme?
You know, there are amazing people that we're featuring. It's always our joy to do that.
Who are some of the ones you're really looking forward to hearing?
Well, there's a young Navajo woman who I am just awed by, and her name is Lila June, and she is both a poet and a spoken word performer, and an extraordinary woman who has been through more trauma and hardship and come out the most extraordinary warrior for spirit that I may have ever seen. So she blows me away. There's a woman I'm super excited about named Ashton Applewhite. And Ashton is all about ending ageism. And, you know, it sounds sort of trite, but once you get into it, you realize this is, in a way, one of the last remaining unnamed biases that runs so deep through our culture that it undermines our human capacity to do anything together and to really optimize the best of our unique callings and gifts and talents. So I'm excited about Ashton and about Kevin Powell, who's this remarkable African-American feminist man who's a really brilliant spokesperson. And of course, Michael Pollan. I mean, how exciting is that? So there are a lot of great people and climbing poetry. And, I'm really grateful, Carl, to recognize that after 29 years, it's sort of a miracle that Bioneers is still here. And I'm looking forward to shifting the paradigm so that more people help us keep it going, so that we can reach our 30th anniversary, because that's going to be an amazing celebration. And frankly, it's such an honor and a privilege to feel like I get this opportunity to contribute in a very collaborative way to offering medicine to so many people through the live experience and all of our media at a time when the world needs it so, so badly.
Nina Simons, thank you for shining your bright, bright light upon us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. It's a joy and honor.